ECommerce 360 folks. Welcome. Today we have Jason Greenwood, founder of Greenwood Consulting. Greenwood Consulting is an independent e-commerce and digital retail consultancy that is paving the way for a new retail future. Welcome, Jason. Welcome to ECommerce 360.
Thank you. Very nice to be here. And yeah, really appreciate you guys hosting me.
Great. Do you want to kick off this podcast by talking a bit about yourself?
Sure, no problem at all. Look, I guess I've been in e-commerce and affiliated with e-commerce and involved in e-commerce for over 20 years now. I've owned my own e-commerce pure play. I've worked in e-commerce for some of the largest brands in the ANZ, Australia, New Zealand region. And I've also worked agency side for some of the biggest, most successful e-commerce agencies in the ANZ region as well. So I guess I've got a pretty broad gamut of experience when it comes to the e-commerce space. And now I've got not only do I work as a director of solutions for an e-commerce agency, but I also have my own independent consultancy as well. So I work across the full gamut of e-commerce, but I do have a specialization on the more technical side of e-commerce and helping businesses scale, helping businesses to architect their full stack commerce solution. So it's not just the e-commerce website, but it's it's the order management system, the warehouse management system, the POS, the marketing automation, the CRM, the CDP, the PIM, basically anything that sits within the commerce stack, including ERP. That's the area that I consult with. So basically, I'll help businesses go from where they are today and roadmap them out into a future that allows them to sort of scale almost limitlessly. And especially with the advent of COVID, I think that's what a lot of businesses are struggling with now is how do we scale our e-commerce operations, both from a people, a process, and technology perspective? How do we scale that? When many businesses now, they've gone from maybe 10 to 20% of their revenue coming from e-commerce. In some cases, it's been flipped on its head to where 80, 90, or 100% of their total revenue comes from e-commerce. If they're an omni-channel business, and obviously if they're a pure play, then they've had to scale their business over the last 12 months in ways that they've never had to scale before. So that's really where my area of specialization lives.
That's quite a wide range of the minds that you have covered, even within e-commerce. What I found the most interesting in your opinion or in your work is scaling limitlessly, right? How do e-commerce go about scaling limitlessly? It's left to their imagination of how many channels they are going to unpack or explore, or is it got something to do with the retention aspects as well?
I think it's got a lot to do with both. So really, when back in the early days of e-commerce, there wasn't a lot of SaaS solutions out there for the various components within the commerce stack. So they were almost all 95+% of the technology in the commerce stack, both back office and front office, were self-hosted technologies. So they were on-premise technologies. And the challenge around that is that you have to, when you set up the infrastructure for those types of technologies, you actually have to set up the infrastructure for the peaks, not the troughs. And so scaling and I guess flexibility were not at the core of on-premise software, really, and ease of use were not at the core of on-premise software. And as time has gone on, SaaS has become the de facto and preferred way of delivering software, regardless of the type of software that it is. SaaS has become the way in which software is delivered today as a preference. And one of the reasons for that is not just the upfront infrastructure costs of getting that software up and running, but it's also flexibility and scalability of that software. And so what I guess during my career, I've seen that massive shift take place, and now I only work with SaaS software. So I only promote, I only recommend, I only architect on, and I only solution around really SaaS software. And so that brings an element of flexibility and scalability to business that is really unique to SaaS software. And so really the scalability challenge then falls to the software vendor as opposed to the merchant who's consuming that software in a SaaS way. it really is down to the merchant to do due diligence on the software that they're implementing to make sure that those vendors can scale limitlessly. And that's where somebody like me comes in, and I can help them go about doing both due diligence as well as both system and solution architecture on those technologies, and also help them to understand how they have to integrate those technologies together for them to share data across those systems for the benefit of both their business and for the ultimate end customer as well. So that's probably the single biggest change I've seen in our industry over the last, say, decade, is that the way in which that software is delivered to the merchant has shifted very clearly and very definitively away from on-premise software to SaaS software. And then with the advent of the death of third-party cookies, and that combined with the skyrocketing cost of acquisition, particularly across paid channels, paid social, PPC, across Google, and in other paid channels, the cost of acquisition is continuing to go through the roof. And as a result of that, we're seeing businesses take a renewed interest both in zero-party data as well as first-party data, and they have a much greater focus now on CSV, so CLV, customer lifetime value, as well as sort of the RFM scoring that they're doing across their customers, and the way that they're leveraging that zero and first party data for the benefit of the customer to give them a personalized experience, to help contain their costs, and to help the business focus on their most valuable customers and ensure that they can, you know, even if they're putting together things like lookalike audiences, they're wanting to not only look at the customers that are driving the most value, but that have that stickiness, have that staying power in the business, and also cost the business the least to service as well. And when we talk about cost to service, we're talking about things like, you know, live chat and emails and phone calls, but we're also talking about, you know, what rate do they return products at as well, because returns are very costly for businesses. So when we look at CLV, businesses are finally starting to realize that they can't just look at the revenue, and they can't just look at how frequently they purchase, and they can't just look at how long that customer is a customer of the business before they churn, but they have to look at the cost of service for that customer as well when they do their CLV calculations. Otherwise, their CLV calculations will just simply be wrong.
That's a lot to unpack, right? So when you mentioned that, e-commerce businesses are leveraging data that is predominantly available because of all these SaaS products that are being implemented, would you be able to tell us what kind of SaaS products or solution that e-commerce businesses readily look for, or in which of the functions of e-commerce businesses do you regularly see requests from your clients to have some of these SaaS implemented?
Yeah, it's not just the e-commerce platform. So obviously we know Shopify is the most popular e-commerce platform in the world. You've got Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which is a SaaS e-commerce platform. You've got BigCommerce, which is a SaaS e-commerce platform. You've got a plethora of other smaller SaaS e-commerce platforms, and they're starting to very quickly displace a lot of on-premise platforms like Magento, like Hybris, and some of the other more expensive on-prem platforms. So SaaS really is starting to eat on-premises lunch. But as we look across the entirety of the commerce stack, so whether we're talking about ERP, and I work very closely with NetSuite as a SaaS ERP and CRM platform, whether we're looking at CRM and we're looking at something like Zoho, or we're looking at something like Salesforce, or whether we're looking at a PIM, product information management platform, and something like Riversand, or a CDP platform, a customer data platform, whether that be Segment, or whether that be Lexer, whether you're looking at marketing automation platforms like Klaviyo or a Digital or an ECommerce, it doesn't really matter whether you're looking at Pause and you're looking at a Vend type platform, which is SaaS, or you're looking at just pure financials and Zero. It doesn't really matter which element or component of the commerce stack that you're looking at. The reality is now there are very, very good, some say best quality platforms that are SaaS that plug into every single layer of the commerce stack. And that includes integration middleware platforms. So if you look at Patchworks, which is a SaaS middleware integration platform, or really it's an IaaS, integration as a service platform, out of the UK. So pretty much every single component of the commerce stack that you can imagine, even down to loyalty platforms and UGC, user generated content platforms. These are all now all of the most popular platforms in the world in these components of technology are generally SaaS platforms. So, and even business intelligence platforms as well, like glue.io. And, there's a number of technologies out there that help customers, or help merchants rather, collect and aggregate, dissect, and segment based on that zero and first party customer data. And then what they do is they start cross-referencing that customer data with their catalog data, so their product data, and all of the rich product data that businesses really need to have today. So all of the product attributes, for example, need to be loaded against that product in a structured data way, so that can be cross-referenced with the customer data, so that you start understanding things like, what's the customer's favorite color? Well, if you're a fashion brand and 8 out of 10 times a customer buys a product in the red color, well, it's a pretty good bet that they really like red, for example. Or if they always buy a size 8, well, it's a pretty good, bet that they're a size 8 customer, for example. So there's a whole lot of inferred data that comes through as part of transactional data linking with product data. But then there's zero party data, which is explicitly provided information that you can request from the customer to service them better, and cross-reference that with products that you have, so that you market and segment on a one-to-one basis. And zero party data is information like, if you're a health brand and you're selling health products, then understanding what ailments your customer may have, or what ailments a member of their family may have. Do they have diabetes? Do they have hypertension? Do they have the flu? What kind of ailments do they have, both short-term and chronic, that you can help them meet that requirement, because they've explicitly told you the type of issue or the type of challenge that you're trying to meet. So and that trickles down to every single vertical and every single industry, that understanding your product data at a very granular way, and understanding all the attributes around your product data, combined with understanding all of the attributes and preferences of your customer data, and then cross-referencing the two together to personalize the customer journey. That's really the holy grail of sort of providing that first level, that first tier, that gold standard of customer service and segmentation and marketing.
That's very interesting. So we talk about how the entire e-commerce is almost being sassified, and then
Yeah.
you went on to talk about how data is the central or the key to personalization. So when you talk about data being very central to personalization, do you believe that personalization ends right after a customer checks out, or does it continue to extend to post-purchase communication, even long after they have purchased your product, during shipping, or probably a month or two after they have received your product, receiving feedback about your product? So do you think it continues to be extended to all these components or areas, so that they can actually create or forge that sort of relationship?
Yeah, well, look, for a lot of brands, it doesn't, and it's to
Uh-huh.
their detriment. It's to their detriment that it doesn't. I believe it should, and I believe for the smart brands, it does. The reality is if I'm a male and I've told you that I'm a male, for example, and 2 months after I've bought through you, you send me a marketing automation email that's recommending a bunch of female products, and I haven't explicitly told you that I'm buying for a friend or a family member that's a female, then that's probably not going to be, a product or a marketing message, that I'm going to respond to, or that I'm going to, convert from. So the reality is that the brands that don't take all of the data and all of the understanding that they have around the customer, both behavioral understanding, purchase history understanding, but taking into account other behavioral understanding. So what have they, what products have they added to their wish list on your website? What products have they added to compare on your website? What products have they added to their cart but never purchased? What categories have they visited? What products have they bought, and what are all the attributes of the products that they've bought from you? There starts to be a really clear picture developed around both the data that the customer elects to give you and that they give you by default through the behavior and interaction they have with your business. And if you're not using all of those data points to the fullest extent possible to personalize not only the marketing message, but also the customer journey on the front end of your website, and also through other channels. So, your other digital channels, whether it be a marketplace experience, whether it be a social commerce experience, contextual commerce experience, doesn't really matter where you are engaging with that customer. But if you are not leveraging or even data that you have around a prospect. So a customer may, have come to you, they may have never purchased with you before, but you start to gather data about that customer at every touch point and every interaction point. If you're not doing that, then it's an opportunity lost. And it's true across all channels of your business. So, if you're an omni-channel business and you've got physical stores and you've got online as well, and a customer buys online and through stores with you, but their average order value online is 20% more than it is through the physical store, then where would you want to incent them to purchase? It wouldn't be in the store, it would be online, and vice versa. Or if in the physical store, the purchase frequency is, twice a month, whereas online it's once every 6 months, then, where are you going to want to sort of, where are you going to get the best lifetime value out of that customer, and where are they going to have the best experience, as evidenced by where they're shopping currently? So if they shop online, but they tend to shop in person because they like that level of service. So if 8 out of 10 purchases are in store, but their average order value in store is lower, then you have to start to unpick, why is that? Is it because the in-store experience isn't as good as the online experience in terms of cross-sells, upsells, product recommendations in store by both the people in store that are serving that customer? Is it that particular location of that store that isn't performing well? There's a whole lot of data that really you should be collecting from both your transactional and your operational systems. So your customer service systems, your fulfillment systems. There's a whole lot of data that you should be collecting across all of your systems, and then running BI, business intelligence, across all of those systems and all of those data sets, so that you can start to quantify the value of that customer by channel, and all of the other data that you collect should be by channel, and you should be able to look at it through a channel specific lens.
So you put it really in an interesting way, right? So collect data across different touch points and do a deep analysis of these data, and then segment your customers based on the data, and then go on to personalize. That's a very interesting way to look at segmentation. Let's talk about metrics, right? So most of the e-commerce businesses are going to be tracking the obvious revenue and profit metrics. What metrics do you think that brands should measure, even especially now post the pandemic, to achieve a sustainable long-term growth? What are the metrics that are definitive of a brand's growth factor?
Well, one of the most important ones is CLV and customer lifetime value. And in my experience, most brands have no idea how to calculate CLV accurately. So what they typically do is they'll look at the revenue versus the cost of acquisition, and that's it. So they'll look at maybe an AdWords spend, or maybe they'll look at a Facebook spend, or they'll look at some form of CAC, even if it's SEO and even if it's organic. They'll simply they'll look at a very generic measure of acquisition costs on average by channel of acquisition. And then what they'll do is they'll look at the customer and which channel they came through as a part of that particular purchase or series of purchases. And then what they'll do is they'll calculate the CLV off that. So they'll say, look, this customer, bought 3 times in a year. The average order value is $100. So they spent $300 with us, and we had to spend $20 in AdWords or Facebook advertising, whatever, to get them. So therefore, the CLV is, $300 minus $20. And so therefore it's a $280 per 12-month CLV for that customer. But that completely neglects all of the operational costs of servicing that customer. It also doesn't tend to look at the cost at a specific customer level. It only looks at it in aggregate across a channel. So for example, the average conversion from an AdWords ad is X, and therefore our average cost of acquisition across that channel is Y, right? But the problem is that what brands can't do, and what they often don't know how to do, is a few different other calculations which are really important, which is, what is their rate of churn, and what does the churn duration look like? So what is the average length of time that a customer stays with your business, right? And businesses will oftentimes choose an arbitrary range. They'll say, if a customer has not bought with us for 12 months, they've churned. But if you've got a long buying cycle, because let's say your product isn't a consumable product, let's say your product is, I don't know, let's say you sell whiteware. Well, you're not going to sell a fridge to a customer every 12 months, are you? You're not going to sell a toaster to a customer every 12 months. If you're selling fast fashion, maybe you will sell something to a customer at least every 12 months. So every business's churn rate should be specific to their business. So they should look across all customers, and they should look at all customers that have bought at least 2 times. And then they should look at when was the last time they purchased. And then they can start to get some averages around their churn rate. So what is for customers that have stuck with you for many years, what is their average purchase frequency? And if their average purchase frequency is 18 months, then 18 months is where the point is that you can consider a customer churned. If they haven't interacted with any marketing messages and they haven't bought with you for 18 months, then they've churned. Some arbitrary 12-month period is not an accurate representation of churn for every business. And so the first thing they need to do is they need to work out, so when we look at CLV, customer lifetime value, right? Well, what is the average lifetime of a customer in my business, right? We can't calculate lifetime value until we look at that, right? Yeah. And then we look at when we acquired them, and then we look at how long it's been since we've acquired them, and the average purchase frequency that I should be seeing. And then we can start to look at an accurate CLV. Then we have to back out all of the customer service costs for that customer. So for every purchase that they make, if on average they send us 2 live chats and 1 email, versus another customer who does none of those things, and on average they send us no live chats and 1 email per 3 purchases, all other things being equal, the customer who contacts you less per purchase, they have a much higher CLV to your business because the cost to service them is much lower. And it's the same with returns. If one customer has, theoretically, let's say that their average order value is exactly the same, and their average purchasing frequency is exactly the same, but customer A returns 50% of the things they buy through you, and customer B returns 10% of the things that they buy from you. Well, customer B is the one that costs you a lot less as a business to service, and therefore their aggregate CLV is much, much higher to your business. So, oftentimes the way that businesses are arriving at the CLV, and there's a lot more to it than just that. I'm just talking in broad brushstrokes, but the reality is that the vast majority of businesses that I've seen, they look at churn being any customer who has not transacted with them in 12 months, and they look at customer lifetime value based on the total revenue that someone has generated since their first purchase with you, to the current time that you run the report on CLV. And that is just not, in my opinion, that, we can look at many different RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value. We can apply different RFM models to different customers customer segments based on their behavior and arrive at a different CLV. And so there's a lot that goes into CLV, but most businesses, they do it really generically, really roughly, and they don't do it by channel.
Okay. So in summary, what you're saying is don't just blindly follow the formula and apply it. Rather, go segment wise, understand the cost of service, and measure the returns while calculating the CLV. And are there any other metrics that brands should be, tracking to improve their, revenue other than CLV?
Yeah, well, one of the things that businesses don't do oftentimes is they don't do NPS. So they do quantitative. They do quantitative analysis, but they don't do qualitative analysis. And so they don't have a feedback form like Feedbackify or Camppile. They don't have any of that running on their website. They don't have an open feedback loop around NPS scoring, so they don't benchmark themselves over time in terms of how their customers rate their service level. They don't actually want to know. They don't want to hear it because they're afraid of what they're going to hear. And so many businesses, they need to introduce some form of qualitative analysis into their customer journey as opposed to just quantitative. So sure, if a customer buys with you three times in a year, and then they stop and they never buy from you again, well, sure, they've probably churned, but you don't know why they churned. And unless you are soliciting feedback actively in the form of both user-generated content on your site, meaning reviews and testimonials, but also things like feedback forms and NPS scoring, and then benchmarking yourself over time and making sure that you're constantly improving and finding out where and how you can best invest in that improvement. If you're not doing that, then you're probably only looking at quantitative analysis and you're missing out on information that your customers are begging and they actually want to give you. If you give them the opportunity to participate in a feedback loop, they will often, especially the ones that are the most disgruntled, they will take the opportunity to participate in your feedback loop given the opportunity. It's just that most brands don't give them the opportunity because they don't want to deal with that volume of contact.
True. So if e-commerce brands, if you're listening, open up the avenues so that your customers can voice their opinion. So Jason, let's talk about what trends you think are going to shape the future of e-commerce. Do you see any specific trends that are going to go huge, or some trends that are going to completely wash out probably in 2022? Give us your thoughts on that.
Sure, I'll talk about channels first, channel trends, and then I'll talk about tech trends.
Sure.
So from a channel perspective, I believe that owned websites are going to decrease in significance and importance from here on out. So it's going to be incremental, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like having an owned website tomorrow is going to be a waste of time and money. I don't believe that at all. But the rise of localized and verticalized marketplaces are having a massive impact on the channel mix of where most businesses are getting and driving most of their revenue from. So any business that is ignoring marketplaces is doing it at their peril, because if you think about what a marketplace is, that it is becoming the mall of the future, right? That's what a marketplace is. And one of the reasons why marketplaces are so successful is because I can purchase in a unified shopping cart, I can purchase 5 items from 5 different vendors, from 5 different verticals, and I can add them all to my cart at once with one single payment, with the marketplace separating out the disbursement of those payments and sending out the shipping information to each of those vendors so that they can then fulfill independently directly to me from that marketplace. Now that's even better than a mall, because in a mall, I still have to go shop by shop and pay once in each shop that I visit. With a marketplace, not only can I shop a whole bunch of stores in one place, but I can pay one time and I can put in my delivery information one time or have it stored with that marketplace. And in fact, have my payment method stored with that marketplace with almost zero purchase friction, right? So that's what the rise of marketplaces does. And it also allows people to do a discovery of both product and price in in a way that is just so easy and so fast that you can totally understand why marketplaces are just growing so fast. And it's not just Amazon. We're talking every localized and verticalized marketplace is growing, most of them. I mean, there's very few. It's very rare that you hear about a marketplace going out of business. It's extremely rare. They all do very, very well. Now there's going to be a consolidation in the marketplace space, I believe, over the next 10 years. And it seems, for example, in Australia, there's a new marketplace launched almost every single day, and that's not sustainable. We know that, right? There's 20 or so major marketplaces in Australia, and I believe marketplaces will go through the exact same growth trajectory that Daily Deals websites went through. So for a few years, Daily Deals websites, it felt like a new Daily Deals website was opening every single day. And now a whole lot of them have gone out of business. A lot of them have, through mergers and acquisitions, they've acquired each other. And now in every major region and vertical, you've kind of got one major Daily Deals website that is successful, right? You don't have 20 of them. And as a result of that, I think marketplaces are going to go through the exact same growth and retrenchment sort of trajectory. I think that's going to happen. It's got to happen because customers, they're just not going to buy off of 20 marketplaces. They're not going to do it. So, there's going to be some consolidation there. But I think the secondary thing that's going to happen that's going to reduce the importance for the customer. I'm not talking about the importance to the brand, because having an owned website for the brand is really important because the cost of acquisition is lower, the cost of retention is lower. All of the metrics in terms of direct communication with your customer and building your database and all that happens on an owned website. It doesn't happen on the other channels to the same degree. So, the value to the merchant is going to stay just the same, but the value to the consumer of an owned branded website is going to diminish dramatically over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's going to be in favor of the marketplaces we just discussed and commerce everywhere, starting with social commerce. So, contextual commerce is starting to invade every single area of our lives. And it's not just social media and in-app purchases, but it's going to be through our smart fridge that will automatically reorder things when something is expired. It's going to auto scan all the stuff we put in our fridge in terms of expiry dates through IoT. And automatic IoT chipping of every food. Well, basically, IoT is going to be the game changer for commerce, where it's going to effectively enable every single physical item in existence. It's going to enable it for commerce in a smart device kind of a way. And so that's going to be a radical change. And I've coined a term, and I've written articles about what I call stealth commerce. And that is commerce where the consumer doesn't even realize that a transaction has been done. So they're going to say, look, I want to, we're going to have smart clothes that know they've been washed 50 times and now they're worn out. And if I say I want to at all times have 3 pairs of good jeans in my wardrobe at all times, and those 3 pairs of jeans I have are smartified, and I know after 50 washes they're worn out, and I need to have one automatically sent to me to replace it. That's going to happen without me choosing to make that transaction happen. I will set up that transaction with my vendor of choice in advance. So this is going way beyond a subscription box or a subscription model. This is an on-demand, automated model whereby food and clothes and pretty much everything that we buy will be automated in terms of the transaction, to the point where we don't even realize the transaction's happened. It's just going to hit our credit card. And in that environment, an owned website doesn't mean shit, right? It doesn't mean anything, right? The customer is not going to go to your website. You're not going to have a chance to make a sale through your website. So the only way you're going to be able to make a sale is the first sale. So moving forward, incumbent power players like Amazon will have much more power than they do today, because those transactions will become automated through those vendors moving forward, instead of having to be a transactional choice that the consumer makes each and every time. And so therefore, you're going to see a future where incumbents become stronger, and breaking into a market and acquiring new customers is going to become much, much harder and much more expensive.
That's true. And this is a phenomenal viewpoint, right? Marketplace being a digital mall, and how own websites are going to have diminishing returns.
Yeah, look, I'm not predicting that this is going to happen tomorrow, but we've seen it in when we look to Asia, right, as a
Yeah.
bellwether. We look to Asia many times, and in particular, we look to China
Mhm.
as a bellwether and as a bit of a canary in the coal mine for digital commerce. And when
Mhm.
we look at new retail, right, Jack Ma's famous terminology, new retail, which is
Yeah.
converged online and offline retail, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when we look at what's happening in Asia, particularly in China, the power of individual websites and individual brands selling through websites is dropping very, very rapidly in favor
Mhm.
of contextual and social commerce and marketplaces. And we can see them. They're probably a decade at least ahead of where
Mhm.
the rest of the world is heading. And so we can see exactly where this is going. And they kind of are Asia is kind of like the crystal ball of the future of digital commerce. And where you have in Asia where you can pay with your face and you can pay with your thumbprint and you can just
Yeah.
walk out of stores, and you can have these transactions that just don't feel like transactions because you're not actually having to pull out your credit card to make a payment. You're not having to pull out cash to make a payment. You're transacting in such a friction-free way that you don't even
Mhm.
realize that the transaction has taken place. And that is really, when we think about the future of commerce, that is the
Mhm.
future of commerce. Is 100% friction-free transactions.
Mhm.
That is the holy grail of all commerce and all
Mhm.
merchants.
Absolutely. So we are going to wrap up this podcast on that exciting note where we will envision 100% friction-free, where customers can just slide in and slide out whenever they want without even really, swiping their credit card or, having to give their delivery details. It will be as friction-free as possible. So we are going to wrap up on that note. Thank you, Jason, for giving us almost a crash course on e-commerce and how e-commerce businesses can scale, what kind of commerce stack should they be looking at, and how far they have come from, being an on-premise system. Thank you so much, Jason. It was lovely having you on the show.
You're very welcome. The last thing I'll say, because I promised you the technology piece, because I
Yeah,
just talked about channels. Now I'll just
sure,
very quickly, 2 minutes before we go. I
sure,
don't want to leave the audience hanging about the technology piece. The two pieces of
definitely.
technology that I am seeing go ballistic in terms of demand and
Mhm.
need in the market is
Mhm.
PIM, product information management platforms, and CDP platforms. Those are the two platforms right now, even
Mhm.
more so in some respects than e-commerce platforms themselves. From a
Mhm.
tech stack perspective, those are the
Mhm.
two kind of newish pieces. A lot of brands
Mhm.
haven't even heard of those two pieces of technology before. They've heard of
Mhm.
Shopify and BigCommerce, but they've never heard of the popular CDP or PIM
Mhm.
platforms.
Yeah,
Those are the two pieces of technology that help brands tie all of this data together. And those are the two pieces of technology that I think over the next 12 to 24 months are going to become really extremely important to almost every mid-sized brand and larger.
amazing. That's true. Data is going to sell like hotcakes, and data management systems are going to are going to be at the center of, I think, the sale point. That's great. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming on our show and imparting so many deep insights about e-commerce and how e-commerce businesses should go about, operating. Thank you so much.